Hello and welcome to another Consent Dojo. I'm Midori, your proxy for everyday persons because I want to understand the nuances of consent. We gather here about once a month, and this is, what did we say, episode 30?
38.
Oh my goodness, we've been doing this over 3 years. So we gather to discuss the nuances of consent because consent, seemingly simple, not easy. And it's actually quite nuanced. And I have the pleasure of interviewing interesting people and learning from them, many of them friends and amazing colleagues, such as yourself. And we are going to get together and work on building our consent muscles because this is an everyday practice in all the little things. And so often consent gets taught in the moment of hotness. It's like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of a date, or I'm maybe negotiating a kink thing, and I need to give consent, and let's talk about it in that context. No, consent is an everyday thing around every action, interaction. For that matter, crossing of obeying and doing as a street light, traffic light, that's even a consent issue. Do I consent to abide by social norms and, well, the law, and consenting, like, offering you a cup of coffee? You get to consent to that. And in so many ways, I think many of us abdicate our consent in little ways, or we overreach on the consent. But today, we are going to be talking about hotness that is sexting. And for those of you who might not know the word sexting, my mother might be watching this. No, actually, she won't be watching this. Okay. So it's okay. Okay. So, well, before I get into this, gosh, I should introduce your loveliness. So today I've got the pleasure of having Nadège, and there's a little accent mark on the E. I'm always having to ask about how to pronounce, and it's embarrassing.
Perfectly. No, you did great.
And then I'm like, I have a moment of, right? So today we're going to be speaking with you, and you are a sex scholar and a best-selling author who graduated from UC Berkeley. Go Bears! I'm also a Cal grad. Yay! You're the founder of Pleasure Science, that's capital P, capital S, where you teach how to trust and love sex using people's natural strength. Your work's been featured in Cosmopolitan, Women's Health, and the History Channel. History Channel? Really?
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
On an average day, we can find you in your home office in your power ponytail. And I saw your social media post. That was great. And as you use your nerd
Oh yeah, the
school
power
dress.
ponytail. Yeah, you saw the power ponytail. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And folks, you can follow Nadège at Pleasure Science on Instagram and stay up to date on the wellness events and online courses and the latest sexy research. Now, speaking of the internet, in the description, that when this goes on YouTube, in the description, I may end up having to weirdly spell sex.
Yeah.
And that sucks because sexuality educators, such as both of us, and activists and health organizations and resources as well, have been getting deleted and hand slapped and account slowed, hidden, etc., for using common sexual wellness and health and consent language. So in the comments, you're probably going to, in the resource list, see things that are spelled horribly. That is not what I want to do, but I also want to keep the information alive.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm mentioning that. But you have an interesting career, my dear.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, not the sexting thing yet, but what what's the thing around your work that absolutely thrills you and charges your battery?
Mm. You know, it's funny. I feel like I go through phases as a sex scholar. I'd say the first thing is just an insatiable hunger for knowledge about sex, but also why humans are doing the things that we do. And is it unique? Like, are we doing things differently now? Are there things we did in history? Like, I'm such a nerd about human behaviors. And then specifically as it relates to sex, because I was someone who grew up loving connection and sex and, started just exploring young. And then I get this feedback a lot from people who I love of, you're so unapologetic, it's so inspiring. And it's true, at a young age, I was going to sex parties, I was doing all different types of things. And I was always the friend growing up who wasn't judgmental ever. And so it's really, it's when I think of the things that really fascinate me about being a sex scholar and doing this work, I think it always boils down to, why are we doing the things that we're doing? Why are we the way that we are? And right now, things that really fascinate me, I mean, sexting and human behavior is definitely one, but history is something I'm going really deep into right now, because and this is for another time, but I hate it when people say, oh, queer people didn't exist through history, trans people didn't exist through history. It's normal for sex to be private and shameful. No, all of these things are actually not true. But no, I mean, this just insatiable thirst for knowledge, right? And I feel like you and I are similar in that way. Like, we're both very deeply nerdy people, right? Like, big throbbing brains.
Yeah, okay. So sex scholar, I think a lot of people might not know what that means. So you
Right.
gave us a little bit of view on that. Now, and I was just thinking, looking at the past, and now we're looking at a current sexting is something that's current, that's going to be evolving and morphing, but using technology for erotic communication, that's not a new thing.
Right. Yeah. No, not at all.
Um, Picking your throbbing brain, um, can you give us some examples in the past of old
Mm,
technology from ancient to recent
yeah.
that parallels or serves the same function as sexting?
Art history is a fascinating way to look at this.
Mm,
When we
I
look
love art
back,
history. Oh my
I
God.
know, right? Art history, because we see eroticism all throughout art history, right? And we see these subtle nods to it. And so depending on what century or even what millennium you're looking at, you can find different things. And so if we're going to go back thousands of years, we can use art history. We can also use medical records. A great example of this is the enema. The enema goes back almost 5,000 years. We can trace it back to the ancient Assyrians, and we can trace it because of two things. One, we have stone tablets that are still around today of medical histories and practices. So we have that. The other thing that we have is then art history. And so what's interesting when we think of maybe like ancient sexting, for lack of a better term, because they obviously didn't have sexting then, but enemas were something that were a medical procedure, and yet it was an eroticized thing as well. There's a lot of surrender in the enema that can be very erotic. You're also dealing with the anus that has a lot of nerve endings. So there's this medical erotic crossover. And what's so fascinating is when you look at art history, you see artists eroticizing the act of enema. And so we can use this to know, like, okay, we have the medical proof that humans were utilizing this practice thousands of years ago for medical reasons, but we also have proof that maybe they were being a little kinky. Maybe they were eroticizing it, right? And so, oh, I'm sorry, my dog just decided to bark a whole bunch. Momo, let me put her outside. I guess she's excited about the enema. So sorry about that.
So while the she's taking care of her pet. Technology. Technology in the past, I feel like every technology, its second use, second to its originally intended use, is around sex. You know, sure, movies, yeah, writing, totally, but telephone and oh, let's see. I can't say the same for laser pointers, though. Laser pointers, laser things, sighting devices, its second use was cat toy. Somebody out there is using it for sexuality, but my primary use for laser pointer or laser sighting technology is cat toy. For those of you who are watching, can you think of examples of old tech that serves the same purpose as sexting? Thing that comes up to my mind is dirty limericks and erotic ditties, also letter writing, and the erotica classic Story of O was a
Mm.
series of privately written fiction to one's lover. And in Japan, certainly in the Heian period, writing Japanese poetry had a lot of double, triple meanings. And so there would be an sexting done in poetic form. So the noble class would like write it on their fan and have their fan sent to them.
Mm. And I love that. I love what you're going over because sexting can be so diverse. We have the written way, but we also have the photos. And I love that for you. Like a reason why I thought of the enema and art history is because when I sext, it's predominantly photos. It's not as
Mm-hmm.
much written language. And I think we all have different tempos with how we flirt and how we connect,
Mm.
right? And so I love how for you, I think we just clued into a little like you might be a more language wordy,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you were to sext. And so I love that for you, you think of the letters, which is so true. The letters of ancient times are so fun and erotic. And then for me, as someone who's more in the photo realm, maybe I think of art history because I think of, oh, they're making a physical, you know, picture of sexuality, right? So interesting.
I would even, well, some of Shakespeare's um, sonnets were just straight up sex,
Yeah.
and many. Rumi, certainly. Yeah, you're right. Actually, my version of sexting is in language,
Mm.
and sometimes just straight up smutty porn language, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes leaning more into a little more Regency era, sometimes even like kind of sci-fi languages. So yeah, you're right, actually. And images I've sent and that doing that hidden meaning thing have often been suggestive objects, right?
Mm.
I remember sending photos of like I was hiking and I came across this tree, this beautiful gnarled tree that it's I'm not sure what the botanical word is, but there were where the branch broke off or didn't grow, it looked like, well, vulva. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a couple of trees that looked like lovers entwined. There was one that positively looked like spread legs vulva. Oh, and where was this? Actually, I think it was backpacking Mount Whitney.
Mm.
And there's a spire that looks like a hard cock. So my sexting are visual puns often,
Mm.
or things that remind me the sensations that might remind me of someone.
Mm.
Oh, and I love emoji sexting.
Yes. Oh my God. That's a fun way to do it too. I love the like heart emojis, but I also love the squirty emoji and the peach booty. We love a
Mhm.
peach booty, right?
And then, I might be using the chains and I might be using the
Yeah.
boxing one.
Mm.
Uh, and there's Yeah. Um, so there's creative emoji usage, and people can just assign meaning to, if you had an avocado, what could it mean?
Yeah.
Um, and the different hand shapes, you can assign your own meaning. And the spade symbol sure looks like a butt plug.
Yeah, it does. Ooh, I love that.
Hmm. Yeah. So tell, we just talked about like old tech. It's been
Yeah.
something that we've been using all technology available
Yeah.
to send erotic words, images, etc., to one's lover, presumably.
Hmm.
Why do people sex? And looking specifically at devices.
Yeah. Well, that's what is some of the really cool research coming out right now is we really see how, first off, when we look at what social scientists say about human connection, like taking a step away even from sex or even from sexting, intimacy, period, is evolving with technology, right? We have our phones, we have phone calls, we can have long distance relationships, we can maintain friendships overseas. It's a complete, and of course, with letter writing, this was something that people could still do, but it was so delayed and now it's so instantaneous. And so connection and intimacy is changing in terms of expectation, right? We expect people to be more available to us. And then two, it's changing in regards to our phones and the relationship we have with the object of our phone. So you
Hmm.
are in a relationship with, yeah, you're in a relationship with this little device. And what I love it. And what social scientists are starting to kind of say, and people can agree with this or not agree with this, it's more of a theory at this point, but it's something that's fascinating to consider is that humans are kind of cyborgs. When we leave the house and we forget our phone, so many of us feel like we've lost a limb. We have to turn around and go back. We can't function. There are also so many of us who actually truly rely on the phone. I have a friend who she recently moved to Los Angeles where I live, and she got into her phone and realized she didn't, she got into her car, got into her phone. She got into her car, realized she didn't have her phone, and she was like, I can't go anywhere. I literally use it for GPS for everything. I just moved to this new city. And, we have outgrown older technology. Like when I was younger, when I first started driving, I would print out the map quest, right? Like if I was going, right, we used these older technologies. And so because we are so reliant on our phones, not just for connection, but also for function and basic life, we're moving into a place where there are scientists who are like, this is a modern form of, for lack of a better term, being a cyborg. And of course, we have the fantasy cyborg, which is a human that has like a metal arm. But we can really think of this as sort of an extension of our arm, an extension of our brain, an extension of our
Hmm.
needs, or at
Hmm.
least that's how it can feel. And so when we think about sexting and our phones, there's a lot of layers to this. There's the layer of it's accessible. And so we want to do it. There's the layer of we feel a connection to our phone, and then we use this phone to connect to people we love. And then there are the options available for this connection. And for better or worse, humans love options and we love playing with
Yeah.
these things, right? And so we see sexting changing the way humans are evolving with intimacy, right? You can now, in terms of just intimacy, if you miss your lover, you can text them, you could call them, you can voice note, you could send a sexy pic, right? You can do so many things, and humans are doing it. And
Hmm.
wherever people fall, because sexting is a hot topic. There are people who think it's awful. There are people who are like, what about the children? What about the youth? But then there are adults who are like, well, I'm an adult. I should be able to do as I please. I've been alive. I've survived on this earth. Let me text my boobs, to my lover.
Right.
Um, and so people fall all over the spectrum with this. But what's interesting is it exists and we're using it. and we're using it on a very large scale. And even if people don't believe in sexting, they still are engaging in sexual or textual intimacy.
Textual intimacy. I like that word.
Yeah.
I want to make a reference for the viewers, and you might be interested in this as well. Back a while, I interviewed Dr. Marky Twist. It was Consent Dojo 29, and we talked about what is digisexuality, consent and human synthetic relationship. I'll put the link in there, and talking about, well, the whole cyborginess of us.
Yeah.
That, but what you bring up is really interesting in we have partially externalized our erogenous zones, right?
Yeah.
And I put the link in there, Consent Dojo 29, what is digisexuality? So Dr. Twist is also, Dr. Markey is what she goes by, is also doing some research around like the edge, the extreme edge currently of digisexuality, but also that we are, like you said, cyborgs, or that we have expanded the physical limits of our erogenous zones. It's
Yeah.
not just this, now this.
Yeah.
And it also got me thinking around the immediacy and the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hot. The downside that I see is perhaps we've gotten not as good as being alone with our own desire or to experience longing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I mean, if we even just look at what social media has done to the attention span, right? That has,
Squirrel.
yeah, exactly. For better or worse, the attention spans of human beings has completely shifted. And this creates a lot of urgency, I think, in intimacy and self-intimacy as well, and a real difficulty with not being stimulated and not
Mm.
being and being without your phone. You know, something I actually love doing is leaving my phone at home and going out into nature for a day and having like a digital detox. And I know a lot of people do those things, but it does. I mean, it brings a lot of questions to light in terms of, because the thing is we are evolving. The technology is not going to be slowing down. And I hear people all the time, you know, have a sense of nostalgia, but also fear, like nostalgia for how it was, and then fear for where it's going. And I wonder if having fear about sexting, technology, all of these things, I don't know if that's the most productive feeling for us to have. I feel like the most productive feeling is for us to get curious because these things
Mm-hmm.
aren't going away. How do we integrate it? And then, of course, you know, how do we do that consensually with, right? With, and, you know, not just with other people, but like Midori made such a good point of, you know, you can consent with your lover, but what if you're on a train and your lover sends
Oh,
you something, right? Like
yeah. And I
so
think
many,
that was when we were talking before we started
yeah,
recording. So
yeah,
let's dive into consent and sexting.
yeah,
For those who are watching this live, if you want to comment on your feelings around textuality and sexting in the chat, I won't be saying names, but so we can protect your privacy that way. But we'd love to know about that. So let's talk about consent on this.
yeah,
Where does the consent lie?
yeah. I mean, I think the consent, and this is such a base level for consent, but if we're talking about sexting, we always ask first. I like saying like, do you like sexting? And then if someone says yes, then I want to know, well, what is your definition of sexting? What does that activity look like for you? Because like we established earlier, for some people, it might be photos. For other people, it might be language. For some, it could be voice notes, right? And it's so good. I think a big part of consent is understanding people's expectations, right? Like that's a layer that like you could say, oh, I love sexting. And it's like, great. And then I send a photo of my butt and someone's like, that was too much. I thought we were going to have, a conversation role play and we'll be, and that's that, right? And it's like establishing like with something like sexting, that's such an umbrella term. Well, what does that mean to someone, right? And what do we want to do together with that?
You and I ask if people want to sext, lovers want to sext, but we know that's not the norm.
Mm.
I mean, there's a whole big joke of send nudes. I remember seeing actually a Italian restaurant going send nudes as in noodles, and it was
Yeah.
spelled Nood. But the even when somebody's asking to send nudes and the person does or seemingly consents, it may not be with full enthusiastic participatory consent.
Yeah.
It may be from pressure. It
Mhm.
may be without thinking through consequences. And
Mhm.
we're certainly hearing a lot about that through, I can't say just younger people, but people who aren't thinking through what happens to the images, right?
Yeah.
And we trust.
Yeah.
We do tend to trust. Um, so the person, let's say I'm asking you, you
Mhm.
get the consent into me texting you,
Yeah.
but then there's a clarification, as you just said. Um, as me, the person sending, what do I get to consent to?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's an important thing. I mean, and I think that's why it's always so important, especially with sexting, to really talk ahead of time. Because another thing that I see happen a lot in sexting is someone will send a photo or maybe they'll make a suggestive remark, and then the other person won't respond for a long time. That can be another really difficult part of this whole, and a part of digital intimacy, right? Like it's not the same as in-person intimacy, because if I were to say to my lover, something sexy, and then they're just staring at me, I can be like, are you okay? Did you not like that? Right. Versus if I send someone a message and they don't respond, I might be feeling really hurt. And then I might be trying to talk myself down and say like, maybe they're at work, or maybe, which is, again, it's another really good thing to establish ahead of time, thinking of consent of like, oh, I do like sexting, but I don't like being left hanging. If we're going to
Mm-hmm.
sext, if I'm going to send you messages and you aren't around, can you like let me know if you're going to work, for example, if you're about to get into your car, if there's something that's going to stop you from being immediately responsive? Because again, going back to that assumption that people are always available, even though I think we all know better, like people are busy, people have their lives, it won't stop your heart from hurting when you're vulnerable and that vulnerability isn't reciprocated, which is a big part of the sexting and a big part of the consent. But yeah, thinking of the person who is sending the sext, I mean, what are they consenting to? There are people who like to send things, but maybe they don't want to receive the same thing. Or there are people, I mean, we hear a lot about the dick pic, right? That's, a big point of contention in the culture. And all of these tend to be cisgendered heterosexual men sending pictures of their dicks, thinking that they're doing, I think for the most part, when I talk to people, they're not doing it to harass. There are people who do it to harass, but for the most part, people are doing it because they want to receive something in return, right? And they think that this is like, oh, I gave you a little gift. And it's like, well, I didn't ask to see this penis gift today. That wasn't.
You know, I told you that I do visual puns.
Mm,
I have sent pictures of mushrooms from the grocery store
mm. Yeah.
as as a snicker haha. Um, the expectation, setting the expectation of if I'm sending, then what am I expecting?
Yeah.
Period. Um, that's a good one to clarify. I have had situations where I have sent saucy messages and the other person going, oh, I'm so sorry I didn't respond. I was at work. And then I realized I had to clarify. It was this exact thing
Mm,
that I actually don't need a response. If you give a
mm.
thumbs up or a heart, that's fine. But the purpose in that moment with that situation was I wanted them to know that they were thought of erotically. And
Mm.
I didn't need it to
Yeah.
be a response. Um, it would be a bonus, or just like I said, a heart emoji or something like that would be fine, or mystery emoji that makes me go, what exactly does that, huh? Which to me gives me the mystery of there's a response and there's a puzzle, right? But I
Mm.
did have to clarify that I don't require something equally fantastic,
Yeah.
but that I would also delight in random, similarly, but random without a sense of obligation.
Mm.
But so if I'm sending the consent of the response pattern, but I would also think if I'm sending the consent of what's happening to my image or words that I'm sending to you.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that when it comes to sexting and digital intimacy, distribution is the big pain point of this whole topic because humans want to connect. Phones technology allows us to connect in new ways, and we're using them because it's stimulating and it's fun and we want to, and that's beautiful. But then we can also not ignore the fact that things go viral on the internet, things get taken, phones get hacked, right? There is an element of uncertainty, which I think for some people adds to the fun of sexting. I think, especially too, with the younger generation, when I talk to younger folks that I might work with, or if I speak at a high school or a university and I kind of see what's going on, there's kind of you know, I don't care. I throw caution to the wind. I don't care. It's a part of and there's like people who I think make peace with the fact that like, yeah, my nudes could leak, and it's kind of normalized, which I think is troubling. I don't think we should normalize the leaking and distribution without people's consent, but this is
I
really the big
wonder,
pain point.
I wonder if this is the virtual and digital equivalent of stealth sex in public places.
Mm. Ooh, I think you just touched on something. I think so because it's true. There's a lot of people who I mean, eroticism is a way humans can feel adventure. I'll never forget when I was working with a couple and they were talking about how they hadn't been having sex in a while and they just felt like there was no adventure in the relationship. And they used to travel a lot and they weren't traveling anymore. And then one of them realized when sex was really active in the relationship and intimacy and even sexting and these things, they didn't need travel or other things because there was a sense of adventure in the
Ah,
relationship because they had this intimacy. And once that went away, it really felt like there was really no adventure in the intimacy. And yeah, I really feel like you touched on something because
it's risk.
it's risk, and risk is stimulating, right? And
There's a
risk
thrill
can
to
be
risk, yeah.
reward.
Hmm. And a tangible, okay, so like having a quickie in an alley, right? I
Mhm.
gotta say though, San Francisco used to have, like 80s and 90s in particular, used to have a lot of places where you could have public, well, not public like other hidden public play,
Mm.
but nowadays those places are gone. Everything is
Yeah.
well lit, and then there's also security cameras.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And there's
Ringgold
people
Alley.
on their
Yeah,
phones. Like there's
right.
people who are recording, you know, like when we think of like sexting, something that's kind of like the shadow of sexting is people who take photos of people on the street, you know, and post it.
Hmm.
People
Hmm.
who, like, I remember there was, this went viral, maybe, and I want to say it was like 6 years ago, of a woman in an alleyway who was having sex with someone in an alley. It was a private alley. I think it was close to her home, and she's having fun. She's having risky, sexy fun, you know? And someone in an apartment building several floors up saw and they filmed it and they put it on the internet and it went viral. And this girl lost her job and her
Hmm.
face was everywhere. And it's fascinating because it's sort of like we live in this world where, I mean, we are sexual beings, we have urges. I think it's healthy to give ourselves permission to explore those urges, especially as adults and consenting adults. And then we can't control our surroundings. There could be security cameras that catch us. There could be a stranger who does not have good consent and boundaries or care and is just like, oh, this is, let me just take a video of this, right? And
It can be argued too, though, that this was a public space.
yeah,
So then, where's, the stealth public sex has its risk. Now there's a whole nother level of risk in that. And let's say that uh, let's say I'm the woman in that alley.
yeah,
I did not consent to that being filmed, but it's also a public space.
yeah,
And then there's the business about it going viral. And that could also happen with private partners where an
yeah,
image could get posted
yeah,
either out of nefarious intentions or naive stupidity
yeah,
of private communication being posted publicly. And at that moment, that image is now owned not by, say, you and I, if we were the ones, but the platform.
yeah, 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 absolutely. No, for anyone who doesn't know, when you sign up to Instagram or Twitter or TikTok or anywhere and you post a video, you no longer own that content,
I want to
technically.
refer on that one for those who want to know more. On Consent Dojo episode 26, I had the uh, the field expert on digital security, uh, Wolfgang Gerlich, talking about internet privacy and your intimate information. So digital consent, including the information that goes on Bluetooth enabled sex toys.
Whoa.
Right. But the images that you put on any platform, even if we say that, not only people with, like, okay, YouTube, only people with link, or if I make a private message to you on Facebook or Instagram, we actually don't own that information.
So crazy.
It's something to think about for folks. So
Yeah.
then the moment we clicked agree and not read all the things because I don't, and click agree. And by the way, after that episode with Wolf, it was terrifying. Um, I have now consented to my private information, no, to surrender my rights to privacy. So that changes. I'm now in a three-way with me, my lover, and the giant mega corporation who can do whatever they want with the image.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, I think this really boils down to like, then what does this mean for us? And an important topic that I think people don't think about enough, which is self-consent, right? I
Mhm.
think when it comes to sexting and the internet technology, digital intimacy, we have to step into a place of self-consent and really consider, you know, I mean, there's a level that is, there's a lack of control. There's things that we don't control here. If we are sexting, and I'm someone who likes sexting, you know, I love digital intimacy, whether it's written or otherwise. I love voice notes. Voice notes to me are so sexy when I get a voice note from, you know, or I'll like send one. But there are definitely like, there have been times where I've sent a voice note and on the iPhone, you can see if someone kept it or if it disappeared. And there have been times where I've like sent a voice note and I see someone kept it and I'm like, oh, you know, this is someone I met on a dating app. It's fairly new. And I'm just sort of like, well, they have my voice saying that now. You know, and it kind of goes back to self-consent. And I also think like a self-knowing with boundaries, because one thing that's so fascinating about boundaries that I also think we don't think about a lot is you discover a boundary after it's been crossed, right? We don't know the boundary before 9 times out of 10. Maybe sometimes we might know a more extreme boundary, like I've never fantasized about having my hair pulled and I don't want that. Like I actually do like getting my hair pulled, but just as an example, right? Like someone can say, I already know that about myself. That's a boundary. But you may not know that it's a boundary, like, oh, I'm going to send a voice note to someone I just met and it's sexy. And then you realize, actually, now I feel uncomfortable, but I've already done the thing. And
Mhm.
so, you know, when it comes to sexting, I think there's a level of understanding how boundaries work. You figure out your boundaries usually after
Mhm.
they've been crossed and having a practice of self-forgiveness and knowing that slut shaming is about society. It's not about you, you know, like we're internalizing fear of being erotic because we feel like we'll be shamed, but also, you know, self-consent and kind of always reconnecting to yourself and recognizing that in different textual or erotic relationships, consent is also going to look different. Maybe with one lover, it feels really good to send a bunch of things because you can just really feel that you trust them and that intuition is really strong. But that doesn't mean that that practice can cross over into every other connection of
Mhm.
sexting, you know? And so I think when
There's
it comes, yeah, what were you going to
there's
say?
no rule. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no apply to all partners and people
Mm.
formula.
Yeah.
I would also hope that self-consent would come not from a place of fear,
Mm.
but a place of thoughtfulness and
Yeah.
thinking of consequences, yes, but also not be ruled by imagined fear. I do think it's
Yeah.
helpful. Right, these boundaries, we don't know it till we cross it. And then when it comes to the digital world and online world, it never goes away.
Right. Yeah.
And it makes it harder to have mistakes. I get that. I think, therefore, all the more important to hear other people's stories and experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also why it's so important and why it was important for me to share the research of digital intimacy, us being cyborgs, because it can feel like such a big mistake if you sexted the wrong person. And something, at least for me, when I started reading the research about human intimacy evolving with technology, it actually instantly reminded me that I'm just normal. I am experiencing social sexuality like a normal human being. And I didn't deserve anything bad to happen to me because, you know, I was erotic in this way, or I'm not some sort of slutty, terrible outlier, bad girl person, right? For doing these things. In fact, I am a person just like any other who's evolving with technology, right? And like, that for at least me, like that research really helped ground me in a sense of like maybe self-forgiveness for past mistakes, but also just a grounding in it's normal and natural to be erotic in this way. It's not
Where are
bad.
you finding the research? Is this something that the rest of us can also find as well? I
Yeah,
think you've
I'd
been looking
say,
at a book or yeah.
yeah, no, one of my favorite books on this topic, I actually pulled it for this conversation, is Sexting Panic, written by Amy Hasselhoff. And it's all about consent, privacy, and rethinking the criminalization of sexting. It's really interesting because the book opens up with when we hear sexting, a lot of the times we think of two main things. We think of celebrities who've had photos leaked, or we think of youth, young people who are using their
Mm-hmm.
phones. And, you know, the almost sadly classic story now of someone sends a picture and it gets sent all around school, right? And then you're humiliated. And, you know, when I was in high school, that happened to a girl that I knew. And she was dating her boyfriend for years. They were like always together. You know, that couple in high school that is like the kind of golden couple. That was them.
Mm-hmm.
And they broke up, I want to say junior year or something. And they broke up, and he was very charismatic, and she was extremely beautiful, but very quiet. And when they broke up, everyone really liked him and everyone kind of didn't like her. And it was kind of sad because she was a nice girl. She was just a very shy person. And she also had the pretty privilege. And I think people resented her for that. But anyway, all that to say, our senior year, a photo of her, and it wasn't even as far as nudes go, it actually wasn't even that exciting, but a photo of her with a new boyfriend in her bed went all over school, and her face wasn't in it. So she tried to tell people, you know, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. But the problem is she had a very unique window in her bedroom, and people at high
Mm.
school had been to her. So they were like, we know that this was her room. And it was, but I remember, you know, I remember that and just thinking like the photo that went out was her with her partner, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like and and again, it goes back to the distribution. I think when we think about consent and sexting, distribution needs to be a part of the conversation because, of course, you can't, at the end of the day, truly control if someone is going to respect your boundaries. But I do think that there is
Right.
power in saying, oh, do you like sexting? Oh, you do. Okay, what kind of sexting do you like? Okay, cool. And then the third thing we need to talk about is, hey, this is a private thing between me and you. I am not okay with you sharing messages or photos or anything like that. Now, of course, again, you can't control other people and maybe they'll violate that. But I do think that there is power and purpose and you verbally stating what your boundary is with photos being shared and distributed. But again, you know, we also have to work on the right to recourse because as digital intimacy evolves, the law should evolve as well. And that part is being so much slower.
Hmm.
Like we see laws about revenge porn. And you know, for anyone who doesn't know what revenge porn is, it's when someone puts a photo non-consensually on the internet of someone else that they were in a relationship with or that they are in a relationship with. And we see this happen often during breakups where two people were together, they send nudes, they break up, and then someone puts those nudes on Pornhub or on the internet or on, you know, and it's sad because you don't know
Oh,
what you don't
I
know.
just I just did a quick search under
Mm.
revenge porn laws, and
Ooh.
all sorts of things just came up, including it seems attorneys who uh, victim rights and attorneys who specialize in that. So
Yeah.
there's a whole industry coming up.
Yeah,
Oh,
because it
I
was a
also
big,
wanted to
it's a big problem.
I want to mention the book's name again since someone asked, and I did put
Yes.
the link in there. It's Sexting Panic, Rethinking Criminalization, Privacy, and Consent by Amy Adele Hosinoff. Uh, and that can be found all over the place. Let's diving into a topic that I wanted to I mentioned in the promo and the
Yeah.
promo for this is I more about how could I know if someone wants it, and how do I not be a jerk
Mm,
about sexting?
yeah. I think, how do we know someone wants it? Ask, right? Always ask. Communication is lubrication. And the ask can be simple. Hey, can I send you this? Hey, do you want to text about our desires? Is that exciting to you? Hey, can I send you voice notes that are sexual in nature? Right. So asking the question ahead of time and then seeing what the person says and entering into a negotiation in it. Like maybe you ask someone and they're like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. And you can say, okay, like totally understand. We're not here to push boundaries. Is it okay for me to tell you, you look beautiful. I can't wait to see you and hold you later. Is it okay to start there? Right. And to
Okay.
kind of be expansive with what sexting can mean, because sexting is about building intimacy. And a lot of times, I think because of the word sexting, we assume it means like, we're going to send explicit messages. But what if you send yeah, exactly. But what if you focus on sending romantic messages, right? What if sexting and voice notes are foreplay? So I think, in terms of question one, that's a great place to start, is asking the question and then again establishing that expectation, and establishing where the boundary is. And then that goes into how to not be a jerk. Don't be like, the first question is, do you like sexting? The second question should be, what are your boundaries? What are your limits? What do you like to talk about? What excites you, and letting that genuine excitement, full body yes be your guide. And so, and again, another big part of not being a jerk, don't send the dick pic. Right? Don't send something without any warning, without any consent.
Oh,
And
here's another tip.
yeah.
Even between uh, digitally intimate, I like that term, by the way, because it
Yeah.
encompasses a
So
whole
much.
lot.
Yeah.
Digital, and it's also kind of less, right?
Hmm.
Um, before sending an image, even among agreed partners,
Hmm.
see if it's okay timing.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Because that was, again, the other element of not being a jerk. Like, hey, do you want to sext right now? Are you free? So maybe we've established that we like sexting. Like maybe Midori and I establish, oh, we can do our fun, writing it out. But then I start messaging her and she's like, excuse, I'm at a conference. I'm not,
Hmm.
I'm out of the all weekend.
Or maybe I have kids
Mm,
that young'uns who I give my phone to.
yeah. Yep. Absolutely. That's such a good layer. And then again, it's bringing up the something I had said earlier, but so important in not being a jerk is making sure to say, like, I love how you said, oh, I don't need a response if I send a sexy message. But there are so many people, I'm one of these people. I'll get so hurt if I send something and I don't receive something back. And it
Hmm.
doesn't, and this is again, not being a jerk, like you can let people know, oh, I need the reciprocity, but also I don't need, like, if I send someone a very beautiful photo, I don't need you to be like, okay, let me stop everything. Let me make a photo shoot. Let me reciprocate. If you just respond with, you're so beautiful, this turned me on. Right. But it's that back and forth, right? And so a big part, I think, of not being a jerk with sexting is establishing, if someone's around, they can sext with you. And then also establishing, like, if we start this, how do we feel complete afterwards, so that someone doesn't feel like they're left hanging and someone
Hmm.
doesn't feel like they've just thrown themselves out there and been digitally vulnerable, and then receive, not ghosting, but just silence, right? The radio silence. It can be really hurtful.
And with busy lives today, the radio silence might not be anything other than,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep.
So knowing when you're sending your textual media, and that they might not be able to in the moment address it, or maybe the device is, oh, the earlier example, elevator.
Right. Yes, because this is the other element. What if you're in a public space and someone sends someone a message and you open it right in the elevator and you're like, oh, that's my girlfriend's boobs. And now the man behind me just saw that, right?
And
Again.
even if the man behind was not trying to be a creep,
Mm-hmm.
the light goes on.
Yep. And it will draw the eyes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And in fact, that's an interesting part of the Texting Panic book where she talks about the way our attention span works and why we like photos so much, and why, like, if you're at a bar and someone takes out their phone, you're not even trying to be creepy, but you might just look right down at their phone and then be like, wait, I'm reading private messages. I don't need to do that. But it's a big part of this conversation. And I think that's why normalizing the idea that you never ask for consent one time, right? You don't say, oh, can I sext you? We've agreed that this is okay. Now I can just sext you whenever. We keep reestablishing consent, right? Like, can I sext you right now? Is now a good time? I took a super hot photo and want to send it to you. Is that okay? Are you alone? Right? Like all of these things. Because also, what if I'm sending a photo to someone, I'm not okay with other people seeing the photo. It's truly for that one person, but I send it to them without asking, and they're in a classroom and the phone goes off and now other people have seen it, but I didn't ask the question of, are you alone? And to receive this in the right way, right?
Yeah. Let me read from the chat here, and also I
Ooh.
welcome comments and questions. Somebody wrote, I do ask partners for consent before slinky photos. I like that. And the ones who have given bracket consent, I follow with slinky pick above, so that shows in their preview. And I like the slinky. That's nice. It would be funny though one day if you actually did send a photo of a slinky, the toy.
That would be just like a GIF, right? And so they
Yeah.
think they're gonna, that's a
Or
fun edge play, like sexting edge play right there.
right? Or a photo of a hard penis inside a slinky. Ah, that'd be funny. They also wrote that I do mostly creatively crop face and tattoos off, so I'm less worried about it being saved.
Yeah.
Also, Snapchat, another right, Snapchat's as
Right.
great as they disappear, and I get told if the receiver tries to keep it, like a cat bringing you a mouse.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And Snapchat is a good hack, actually. If you're
Mhm.
someone who really does love sexting or in a long distance relationship and you just want to feel safer, Snapchat, you can take pictures. Those pictures always disappear, and you get notified if someone takes a screenshot. So you can actually say, like, hey, I thought we agreed that there were no screenshots, I'm not okay with this. And I see that you did that, right? A good way to protect yourself.
Mhm. I do wonder, and this is probably a question I should be asking to Wolfgang, uh, but on something like Snapchat, on the corporate data end of things,
Mm.
does it actually disappear?
I don't think it does. I actually
Mm.
have some experience in this because a long time ago, before I started my business, I actually was the executive assistant to a tech person, CEO, and he created a social, I forget what it was, but it was a social app for teens that he ended up
Mhm.
having to completely delete and take away because the audience was teenagers. So teens were using this social app, but they were using it to sext. And the way
Mm.
that these tech apps work is, yeah, if you send something on Snapchat, they keep that in their heart. I mean, I can't say 100%, but I'm 99% sure that they keep it because of liability. That was how
It
this other
never
company
goes
worked. It
away.
never goes
Yeah.
away. And so my old boss had to delete this app. He had put all this money into it and he had to delete it because he's like, it's filled with underage photos, like, and he's like, it's the kids doing it. Like, I didn't say, but he's like, I had to kill the app because it's too much of a liability. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Snapchat,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Snapchat
Now,
keeps everything.
another bit of digital data mining
Mm.
around textual and digital intimacy. Uh, I'm getting some really interesting people I'm interviewing. Consent Dojo 33 interviewed the organization that goes by the name of, get this, the Internet of Dongs. And this is a company that or an nonprofit organization that does um, security testing
Mm.
on what's called teledildonics, or digital toys. And this one's about the delight and dangers of digital intimacy, choosing remote devices for safety and privacy, because one can sex while using remote, a very long distance Bluetooth operated mutual pleasure devices.
Mm. Yeah.
And there are ones that are very secure, and then there are ones that are not.
Yeah.
And similar toys that are, say, produced in China may be not only a copyright violation and IP violation, but they don't have the security that, well, companies like Vibe and the Cowgirl and those guys have. So I
Yeah.
just posted that link. Now, all of this, as we're talking about digital intimacy, some of it is straight up using our cyborg tools and technology for sex, but a lot of it's flirting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it is flirting, and a lot of it is, again, it's a way we really establish and check in with social connections. And it's interesting because at Pleasure Science, we actually have a course all about flirting, and we have a quiz that shows you what your flirt style is. I know you recently took the quiz, and I can't wait to hear what your flirt style is. But yeah, texting is a way that we flirt with others. And based on your flirt style, that will completely change the way that you talk to people. And in fact, a lot of times why people are not compatible or having a hard time is because they have flirt styles that are
Hmm.
not complementary to each other, but we don't know what our flirt styles are. And so we don't realize, oh, I'm X flirt style. Like for me, I'm a bold flirt style. So if I go to someone who's a traditional flirt style, we're not gonna get along. That'll be
Okay, back
difficult.
up, back
But
up, back up. What is a flirt style?
a flirt style is the psychological way that you subconsciously flirt and connect with people that you have a crush on. And
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting with flirting is humans flirt for two reasons. We either flirt for connection or with our crush, or we flirt for entertainment. Flirting is also something that humans do because humans want to be social, and it doesn't always mean that you're trying to sleep with someone. It also doesn't mean that you're cheating if you're in a relationship, but you're very friendly. You might just have a playful flirt style, right? And so that's what the flirt styles are.
I've always thought of uh, flirting as a way to let somebody else feel good with no strings attached.
I love that. I completely agree. I completely agree with that.
Now,
Yeah.
I watched this really great flirtation, and yeah, I think oftentimes there's an assumption, this kind of escalation assumption that a flirting
Mm,
is for the intention of going straight for sex.
yeah.
But if we look at this as a way to give warm fuzzies with no other consequence other than making somebody feel desired, attractive, etc. I watched this flirtation, and this was in Montreal. So you get those French
Mm,
Canadians,
yeah.
and a very gay man. And it was in local French, and so I'm not understanding, but I can see what's happening because this is in person. A very gay man is flirting with a very straight man, but very straight in that he's totally comfortable with who he is kind of way. And the straight man flirted back. and in a way that, and they both understood nothing was going to happen.
Yeah.
But the straight guy was like, well, if a gay guy thinks I'm beautiful, I must be.
Yeah.
And uh, the the straight guy, the gay guy, got a kick out of having this positive interaction, knowing that it wasn't going anywhere. They both seemed to know that it wasn't going anywhere other than for the mutually delightful sport of it.
Mm.
So that
Love
was just a
that.
beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah.
And they both had this kind of lovely grin on their face as they parted way in this conversation. Now, I took your flirting style quiz because I wanted to know. You sent me the link to
Yeah.
share. And uh, can you talk, before I reveal what
Mm.
mine is, can you talk a little about the different styles, some of them at
Yeah.
least?
Yeah. So there are 10 different styles. So I'm going to go ahead, and I know we're going to put the links if you're watching this
Mhm.
later, but here's in the chat as well for everyone watching live, the flirt styles quiz and the course that goes along with it. If you really want to learn how to support your flirt style, who you should be flirting with, and the actual social spaces you should be prioritizing based on your flirt style. But
Mhm.
basically, so there's 10 different flirt styles. I won't go over all 10 because that would be a whole TED talk. And we
Mhm.
just gave a beautiful talk on sexting. But some really common ones, there's the playful flirt style. These are people who like to make people laugh, who really like to connect. They're very friendly. So these are people who will flirt for connection, but also entertainment. But then there's people who are the subtle flirt style. This is where it can be difficult to tell for other people that someone might be flirting, but the person who has a subtle flirt style just wants to establish a genuine connection. So they might be a very good listener, right? They might be good at asking questions. There's the sincere flirt style, which can also overlap with the complimentary flirt style. These are people who are very affirming and kind. Like if they're flirting with you, they might be like, what a nice shirt you're wearing, right? And so it's also really interesting to know these things because I think a lot of people don't realize that they're flirting because when we look at the media, the flirt styles that we see in the media tend to be the mysterious flirt, the person who kind of has the eyeglasses, they're cool and coy. We see the bold flirt a lot in the media too, the person who just goes for it, which I'm a bold flirt, and everyone has actually a dominant and a secondary flirt style that kind of complement and work together with each other. Mine are the bold and the playful. So I'll
Mhm.
go right up to someone and then I'll try to make them laugh. But there's also the traditional flirt style. These are people who really feel good with a sense of structure. And so they like flirting to be through the established cultural norms that they grew up with because
Mm.
structure makes them feel very contained and held and supported. And so, but
Can you
again, you know,
can you give an
there's
example of a um to, what was it
traditional.
they said? Yeah, yeah. Example of
Yeah.
culturally established. What do you mean by that?
Well, like in America, right? So I'm French
Hmm.
American. In
Hmm.
France, dating is completely different. And a lot of my French friends think that it's odd that there's this very strict kind of established way of dating. So a traditional American flirt style could be someone who says, oh, I like Sally. I think Sally is really cute. I'm going to go over to Sally and I'm going to ask for Sally's phone number because that is step one. And then I'm going to
Mm.
see if Sally wants to go to dinner, and that is step two. Now, maybe
Mm.
Sally is a shy flirt and you know doesn't know how to respond to getting her number asked, but she is interested, but it comes off incorrectly. Now the traditional flirt is going to think because they're not following the traditional norm, they're not interested in me, right? Because their way of understanding is if you're interested in me, because that's also how humans work. We assume that the way things operate for us is the way another person is operating as well. And then we'll project this
Mm.
expectation, right?
Hmm.
Which is why it's so important to know your flirt style, because you can take things less personally. But that's an example of the traditional flirt
Uh,
style.
how does flirt style reflect into digital intimacies? textual intimacy?
Yeah. Well, with textual intimacy, there are some flirt styles that are going to be way more excited and interested in textual
Mhm.
intimacy than others, right? So a subtle flirt style may not like it so much because this is a person who needs in real, like IRL, in real life interactions, right? They want to go deep with you. Traditional flirt style also may not like it very much because they're trying to have specific markers be met. And
Mm.
textual chemistry is something that would happen much later for a traditional flirt style. They need to be in an established relationship, usually, before they can enter that stage of flirting. They wouldn't do that right off the bat. But then you have a playful flirt style or a bold flirt style, right? These are flirt styles that might actually really enjoy right off the bat doing the textual chemistry. Mysterious too. Mysterious can go either way because for the mysterious flirt style, they like things to be a little ambiguous. They like things to feel mysterious. That makes them feel alive and excited. So they could be someone who's like, oh, let's, what are you doing tonight? Let me text you. But they also could be someone who isn't as textually aware or responsive. And so it really is specific and unique. And texting can be something that complements someone, or it's something that you build later further down in the relationship.
So understanding one's own or the other's flirt style might also help in figuring out, okay, so if I'm more traditional, if I'm more shy, then I it would also give me the internal permission to say no.
Yes, exactly. And that's also why it's so good. In speaking of that internal permission, as a bold flirt style, I put myself out there, but it means I fall on my face a lot. And so
Mm.
when I was younger, I would feel very discouraged and ugly, honestly, because I would have crushes and then I would go up and be like, let me be your friend. Let me talk to you. And people would be like, she's a lot. And yeah, they'd be like, whoa. And so then I would think like, oh, I guess I am too much. I guess I am a lot. And when I found out this scholarship, it was so healing and it gave me permission to be bold and to
Mm.
realize maybe I was going up to people who just did not have a complimentary flirt style to me. Every person has a different flavor, right?
Now,
It's,
if the flirt style's different, is there
hmm.
still hope?
I think so. I totally think so. Because communication is lubrication and you can communicate through anything, right? Like,
So
and that's,
not optimal flirt style is not like this isn't going to
yep,
work. So you just
exactly.
we need further clarity in those consent and boundary and expectation
Yeah.
if you've got a bold and playful and somebody who's more on the shy.
Yep, exactly. And again, that's why it's so nice to have that information. Like I remember when the attachment styles came out, and so many
Hmm.
people felt so much relief and peace because they now had
Hmm.
language for their experience. And that's what
Hmm.
is so nice about knowing your flirt style, knowing who you're more compatible with than others, also knowing what social settings to be in. Because again, like thinking back to the subtle flirt style, someone who wants to talk, get to know you, it would be terrible for them to go to a dance club and try to flirt because the music's too loud. You can't talk, right? And so like there's so much relief that comes with knowing these things about ourselves because we can then understand how to set ourselves up for success.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's what the
Ah,
course goes into, not the quiz. The quiz is free. You can
yeah.
find your
The
flirt
the
style.
quiz is fun.
The quiz is
Yeah,
really fun. And then if you
yeah.
want to really understand how to support yourself, then you can get the course.
It occurred to me, I forgot to tell you that I usually like to ask my guests to have a little real world homework for the viewers. And
Ooh.
perhaps this flirt test is the homework.
Yeah.
And so go take the flirt test. It's free, it's a PDF. It's not even one of these apps things
No,
that
yeah,
does
I
it
don't
for
like
you.
those apps. It's an old
Yeah,
school type of thing. You take the quiz, you add up your numbers, you download
I
it
had a piece of
yourself.
paper and pen,
Yeah,
and I was like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Now, I did have a question in that though. Were we supposed to pick just one in each category?
Yes.
Okay, all right. That part I didn't quite get. So maybe put that in the instructions.
I will. I
So
will. Good note.
go, y'all, this is the homework. Okay, go take the flirt style and do your scoring. Okay, and then think about how that applies to how you like to do sexting and how you would explain your own flirting and sexting style so you can get the other person's consent.
Mm,
What do
love
you think
that.
of that homework?
Beautiful. And I also think we need to now know your flirt style.
Okay, you want to take a guess?
I feel like you're also a bold flirt. But maybe that's just
Ah,
because you're an Aries and you know, I know how Aries.
oh, but I am a Taurus.
Oh,
I am a Taurus and I'm
but
also
you're
a
the
fire
fire
horse.
horse.
Yes.
That's why I thought you were the Aries.
So,
Oh,
ta-da, okay. My style, according to the scoring, is the mysterious flirt style.
ooh, oh, I could see
And
that.
let me read this. You prefer to drop hints when you like someone in hopes it will pique their interest, but it will not be too overt. Flirting is fun when you keep things somewhat ambiguous. You have natural talents when it comes to your magnetism and nonverbal cues.
I love you are magnetic though, Midori, I have to say.
Thank you. And as I was reading that, I was like, what does it mean? And then as we were talking about it, because I did this last night, right? That my, I don't necessarily need a response. I like coming up with our
Mm,
own hieroglyphics of emojis to send, say, an image of a Rodin sculpture.
mm,
So there's the inferring the
yeah.
secondary messages and that it's word driven. Sometimes it is explicit, but with those that I already have history with. So I do tend to use other artistic art environment, the tree stump, right?
Yeah.
And okay, so here's the thing that I will flirt with somebody, and if they don't catch, I will flirt because I want them to feel good, and
Mm,
maybe I'm conveying also an interest as well. But if they don't respond or pick it up, maybe I'm a little disappointed, but mostly I'm amused because
mm,
maybe they don't know why they feel better today.
yeah.
Maybe they don't know that, and I had a part in that. Ha. Or I make a reference to a certain artwork and they're not seeing it as erotic
Mm,
or fascinating or they don't care about it. That says a lot for me.
mm,
Like, okay.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and if they do get it and there's a little, you know, um, sexy side eye going on, oh, okay, I see where you're coming from. I find that to find somebody who's also looking at layers of it. Um, okay, so it probably wouldn't be surprising that some of my earliest erotic movie for me, I don't mean like just sensual, erotic, intriguing, was
Mm,
Dangerous Liaisons.
mm, yeah. I mean, and I loved what you said about the inferring. Like that is a big part of the mysterious flirt. And that's what's fun when you're playing with that erotic energy.
So yeah, I don't know what my secondary is. I'll have to take the course for that. Oh, and is the course like live or digital, or
The
how does it
course
work?
is digital, so you could take it at your own pace when you purchase
Oh,
it. It's $69. Ha 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 ha. I'm a sex scholar, so you gotta give me my fun. But yeah, you know, and you can find out all of the things, and there's even a bonus lesson on dirty talk because that's also another way that we flirt, right? Flirting in the bedroom.
mhm. So as we're wrapping this up, I want to turn to those in attendance. If you have comments or questions, we welcome that. What do you want people to take away about consent, sexting, and digital intimacy?
Hmm. That if you want to do it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not asking for bad things to happen to you. Um, it's a perfectly normal and natural way to be intimate with other people in our current historical moment because we have all of this technology available and it's a way humans are connecting.
Thank you. Now, for those who are here live, you included, stick around. I'm going to close the recording, but we can have a little moment of privacy. Oh, okay, then. And to those who are watching in video and those watching live, I want to particularly thank my Patreon supporters because your support makes it possible for me to do this because I am doing this for free. Consent Dojo is going to always be free and available, and it is with the support of my Patreon folks that makes it possible. And in my Patreon, I have a lot of good stuff, so check it out. It's patreon.com/Planet Midori. All my stuff's Planet Midori. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we're going to have conversations that you will not know what we were talking about.